So, you want to know how I make decals, huh? It's not a method the YouTubers would tell you. It's a Sith legend. Okay, well, it's not that deep. I'm Geoh, and today I'm going to show you how I make decals for my models. So before this all begins, I think I'd like to just make one thing clear. This is just how I personally make decals for models. I'm sure to the average viewer, some of these methods may seem rather odd, but this is how I've been doing it and I've found works very well. I'm going to show you 3 methods varying in complexity, but each having their own pros and cons. Decals, or decals if you want to pronounce it fancy, are probably my favorite part of model making because it crosses over into graphic design, and as you can probably assume, it is my passion. Okay, what I really mean to say is that being able to make art digitally and include it in my physical models is definitely a highlight. Let's start by talking about the paper itself. Decals usually mean sticking to something, and sticking usually means adhesive paper or sticker paper. Most people assume that's what I use, but it's actually not. Although it may be considered cheap to some, I've found that plain paper and a glue stick works incredibly well. In fact, I've employed this method in every model I've made on this channel so far. And you've actually seen me do it in a few videos too. Adhesive sticker paper is nice and I have used it, but I found that its high cost was a particular deterrent for me, especially as my glue stick and paper were very cost effective in comparison, but either works depending on how adventurous you are. Also, this tutorial is not going to be about making the actual designs, but printing them in a small size for your models. Maybe a designing class could be a possible part 2? We begin with method 1, as I dub it, the Paint Pixel method, as we're going to be using Microsoft Paint. Now, Microsoft Paint, I notice, gets a lot of flack for its lack of features and primarily basic set of tools, but I've found it incredibly helpful in making, sizing, and printing decals. For this specific method, I'd recommend using the more recent iteration, Paint 3D, which seems to be pre-installed with most recent Windows computers. And if you don't have it, it's available for free to download off the Microsoft Store. And my apologies to all the Mac users, but this is more of a Windows-leaning tutorial. I'm sure though Mac or Apple equivalents exist of all the softwares presented. First though is getting the area you want to print measured out. Specifically, I'm using this wooden cargo block, which is 4.5 centimeters by 1.9 centimeters. And yes, we're gonna do this the metric way.
50 kilograms?
Kilograms? Talk right.
This metric.
Metric? I got news for you, Hank. We won the war.
After, you're gonna wanna take each measurement and input it into this handy website, unitconverter.net. From this site, we learn that the length of the block, which was 4.5 centimeters, is approximately 204.9 pixels. Now here's where things get a little weird. As you can tell, these amounts are small. And yes, we could essentially just do it in this size, we can go bigger. So we're going to multiply that number by 4, which gives us 819.36. And the height, which is now 287.24. Also, I try to round up or down from the point. Since it's under 0.50, I'm going to round down. But wait, you're thinking. There's no way that can be right. This is 4 times the original size. The reason why I like using Paint 3D comes into play here, is the fact that despite the image being 4 times the size we needed, we're able to print it out at 25%, which will then come to our original measurements. It's a little tricky, but trust me, it works. Though I highly recommend making sure the area is the correct size by making a test print. I usually surround the edges of the shape with a black border and then print, making sure, as I said, print it at 25%. Then I cut it out and check. We can see that the piece is the right height, but the width is lacking, so we just need to expand the original slightly to accommodate this. Now you can live dangerously and ride it out assuming it's fixed.
I also like to live dangerously.
But if you really want to make sure it's perfect, I'd print it out again and test the size. Also for these tests, I like to reuse paper from failed prints or find scrap paper as to not to waste. This is again why I prefer to use standard paper rather than adhesive paper, as the margin of error is a lot lower, and there's more room to make mistakes. If the decal is meant to match the color of an existing piece, which in my case it is, I'd recommend doing a test print of colors to make sure you get an exact match. I found that my monitor lies and things look a lot brighter and more saturated on screen than they do printed. So I usually do 2 or 3 tests with 4 color options on each to match. As we can see in the first test printout of our color options, 1B is the best color out of the 4, but could be closer. From that, we come to the second test, which out of those options, 2B is the closest and fixes the saturation issue. In the third and final test, 3A matches to a T. We now move on to method 2, which I dub the scanning ruler method. This method is where things get a little more advanced, specifically as this method requires a scanner, a computer program to scan with, and a ruler. Well, the ruler really isn't the advanced part, but you get my drift. So with the scanner, what you're going to want to do is firstly place your ruler in the scanning bed with the numbers facing towards it. Then take the item and place it on top of the ruler. Now we scan it into the computer. I use Windows Fax and Scan and usually scan at 600 dpi. As a sheer contrast in methods, we're moving from working with hundreds of pixels to thousands of them. Also make sure you scan it as an image file, usually a JPEG. Once it's scanned, we're going to do a quick test print to see the maximum amount of height my printer can output. Unlike the test print in the last method, once we do this, we won't have to do it again. To start, in Paint, you're going to want to make a rectangle, specifically with a large height, then print it. But when you do, this time with the option Fit to Page. Also make sure that it prints in portrait mode. From this, we can see that the printer can print a maximum height of 25.8 centimeters onto a letter-sized piece of paper. Hopefully now, the inclusion of the ruler in the original scan makes sense. In Paint, you're going to want to crop the photo right at 25.8 centimeters on the image, and now we can start designing here. After you're done, you can use the same Fit to Page print option and it'll be in scale. I don't do this method as often as the first one, but when I usually do, it's when I need to print something that's in an odd or awkward shape. For example, the lining over Emily's arches. And with that, we come to our final method, which I call the border method. This is what I use for things that I know I need small, but I don't need them at a particular scale. I've used this method most when printing art like posters or signs for my dioramas, specifically all the art you see in the Aqua Idol room. All you have to do with this one is simply put a white border around what you want printed, then use the Fit to Page option. Simple as that. I'd also advise for this option, make as much use of the space as possible, as in put multiple things if you can, like I did here. And that's how I print and make my decals. Once again, this isn't a be-all end-all method, but simply how I do it. There are probably much better ways, but this is what I've gotten used to and I'm honestly pretty happy with. If you have a particular method that you use, leave a comment below as I'd be curious to know what my subscribers do. Also, as mentioned in the last video, I currently have a PO box open, so if you'd be interested in sending something along, check out the description and pinned comment. Also, while you're down there, feel free to check out my Linktree where you'll find links to my Instagram, Twitter, and Ko-Fi. Any and all support helps. I've been Geoh, thanks for watching, have fun decaling or decaling, and I'll see you next time. Let me say though, I'm sure this method will be timeless, one that will stand the test of time. Oh no.